Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Thursday Night Theory for week 9 here. Already week 9, so we're just going to get right into it right off the rip. Thursday Night Football. Let's get our full screen view here. Houston heading into the New York Jets. We're going to try to explain how I interpret the adjusted line play report here. So hopefully you guys can get some money from your DFS ventures, your prop bets, and from your league mates that you're playing. So you start the right people or you sit the right people every week. So Houston versus the Jets. First thing we look at for these particular island game matchups, we look at the Vegas game total. So it's 42 points. That's pretty low. You want stuff a little bit closer to 47 and above to be a little bit better a score. 42 is a little on the low side. And then we look at the Vegas line. So -2 here. New York Jets actually 2-point home favorites. The line started out at -1.5. So the betting over the last day, this is being recorded Wednesday evening. I updated this first on Tuesday afternoon, and Vegas line is actually shifted from -1.5 to -2 in the Jets' favor. Vegas game total stayed the same. So some of the money going into the New York Jets side, public in general, the Vegas believe that the Jets will win by 2 points on here. So Jets have a 22 team implied total, Houston 20 for their team implied total. And first things first, let's get into our offensive and defensive matchups. We're going to look at the pass protection first. So that's what we have on the screen here. Houston and New York Jets in that category. We have offensive pass protection, defensive pass rush pitted against each other, and then offensive pass DVOA, defensive pass DVOA pitted against each other in their team ranks. So what is offensive pass protection? That is a adjusted sack rate. So it takes into account all the times that Houston has been sacked, and it takes into consideration the situation that they were in when they got sacked. So if it's fourth quarter, 4th down and 23 yards to go, and it's the last play of the game, and they get sacked on a game like that, that's probably where you're going to expect a sack, versus maybe something where it's 2nd down and 3. If you give up a sack on 2nd down and 3, that's a little bit worse. So it's an adjusted sack rate based off of down and distance, situation, things like that, and they adjust for the opponent and all of the situation stuff. So that's what the offensive pass protection is. That's what the defensive pass rush is. It's just the defensive version of that. If they get a sack on 2nd and 3, it's really good for the defense versus one that's maybe 3rd and 17 where you'd expect a sack. That's not going to count for as great of a thing in this particular adjusted sack rate. So knowing that, we have Houston's offensive pass protection at number 21, the Jets' defensive pass rush at number 5. This is a heavy favorite for the New York Jets defense. This is telling me that they will be able to get after the quarterback. So CJ Stroud may need to get the ball out quick. Typically when there's a mismatch there and the defense is getting after the quarterback, I think they're probably going to be under pressure. Good reminder that this is not a pressure rate. It is an adjusted sack rate, so Jets might not be that good at pressuring, but they do get home. That's always a possibility. But in general, I say, hey, if it's a big mismatch here and the offensive line looks like it's going to get overwhelmed, he's probably going to be under pressure and looking to get the ball out quicker. So that's going to lead to more dump-offs, probably to Joe Mixon and the tight end group there and anybody running underneath routes. So Houston, with all of their injuries piling up here, they basically have Tank Dell as the only viable route runner there. And I think Xavier Hutchinson is probably next guy on deck. They also have John Mechie, I think, running a bunch of routes for them. So those are like the 3 that you're probably going to pay attention to. But Dalton Schultz as a tight end. Tight ends will get a lot more targets too because they're running some of those quicker routes. So running backs, tight ends, typically will see more targets in a situation like this, and then anybody running shorter routes. And then getting over to the offensive pass DVOA. So this is basically defense adjusted value over average. Instead of an adjusted sack rate, you can think of it as the overall pass game for the offense or defense here and how they've been performing against their opponents. So it takes into consideration the situation yet again. So down, distance, what the score is at the time, and it says based off of this situation, if you do a pass play on this particular situation, this is the average outcome of that particular pass play. If you outperform that, that's good. If you underperform it, it's bad. You go kind of above or below. And it also adjusts for the opponent. So, if you're facing the number one team and you get exactly that average, it's probably going to count for a little bit better of a thing. So it's actually probably going to give you a positive boost in that scenario because it was going against the number one defense. That suggests your offense is maybe a little better than average on that particular play. So that's kind of how the DVOA aspect works for both pass and rush when we get into that. But the matchup here, Houston's offense at number 20, the Jets defense at number 18. That's pretty close. They're within 2 points. They're usually in that situation. I say there's no real advantage on the offense or defense. And in those situations, you would expect like a normal day at the office. If you have somebody on your team that is an absolute stud, they usually can overcome these matchups. So a lot of times when I say this is a close matchup, I'll say studs eat. That's kind of what I say in terms of that person is just better than the person across from them because they are that good at football. And in those scenarios where it's close, where it's just a standard day at the office, nobody really taking over, that's going to be a situation where that person who's just good at football is going to get a little bit more attention in that particular game. So with it being, maybe a little bit quicker throws, Tank Dell, very good route runner. I think he could see a few more targets, but otherwise, I wouldn't expect anything too explosive out of the offense here for Houston. I think if Tank Dell isn't going to get a few more targets, if they're going to be under pressure, I think you're going to see a lot of dump offs to Mixon and Schultz in this particular matchup. Don't be shocked to see them with increase in targets in this particular game, and then maybe Tank Dell getting hyper-focused for the rest of those targets when they do have time to throw. I think he is going to be the one that ends up getting the ball in those situations. All right, so that's the away team. We went over the pass protection stuff and the pass game. Now we're going to get over to the run side here, offensive run blocking, offensive run DVOA. So what are the difference between there? We already kind of went over the DVOA aspect for the pass game where it says, here's your situation, down and distance, what quarter it's in, what's the score at that particular moment in time. Here's what the average play is on that. How did you perform compared to that on that run? And then it says you were above or below that average. It adjusts for the defense. That's pretty much how it goes for the offense and defense there. But offensive run blocking, what is that and how is it different than DVOA? So basically teams are ranked according to adjusted line yards on this. So based on some regression analysis that's done by FTN Fantasy, specifically Aaron Schatz, this adjusted line yards formula takes all running back carries and assigns responsibility to the offensive line based on basically the outcome of the run. So if it was a loss, it's basically going to assign 120% value of that particular outcome to the offensive line. So losses are really bad. If it's a 0 to 4 yard rush attempt, it's going to assign 100% of that outcome to the offensive line. If it's a 5 to 10 yard gain, that's going to assign a 50% value to the line, saying, hey, they attributed, but likely the running back had something to do with gaining 5 to 10 yards on that. They only get half the value. And then if it's an 11 yard or longer run, that offensive line basically gets 0 credit for that particular run. So the numbers, basically after that, assign those following percentages. Those numbers are then adjusted based on the down, distance, situation, opponent, and the difference in rushing average between like a shotgun compared to standard formations. They take all that into consideration. And finally, they normalize those numbers so that the league average for the adjusted line yards per carry is the same as the league average for a running back yards per carry. why are these rankings different from the team offensive DVOA or even the offensive run DVOA for rushing? So, some reasons they don't include quarterbacks or fumbles in this particular outcome. So those aren't included in there. They are in the DVOA outcomes. Long runs are truncated, so you're going to get credit for that in DVOA, but not as much here for the offensive run blocking. Different set of adjustments apparently is used for DVOA versus this as well. And then really what they're doing is attempting to isolate the line play rather than the total team offense. So that's what they're trying to do here with the run blocking aspect. So that's a little bit into how that's different than the DVOA, and hopefully that made sense. So with that being said, Houston offensive run blocking number 20, New York Jets number 23. You can see they're red there, so they're in the bottom 10 in that particular category. This is close. It's one of those stud-eat situations, but also Houston at number 20 isn't very good, but the Jets at 23, they're in the red. They're also not very good. A lot of times, even though that's close, I'll say, hey, Houston's probably going to have a little bit better luck in the run game than they're otherwise used to. Along with the studs eat kind of scenario, I would expect them to be able to get positive yardage on a consistent basis based off of this information. And then looking at the DVOA, Houston number 25, not very good. They're in the bottom 10, but the Jets also in the bottom 10 at number 23. So in those scenarios, again, studs eat. We've seen Mixon be an absolute monster for sure in terms of volumes, but just fantasy scoring. So this looks like he's going to be able to do pretty well in this particular game. We already talked about the pass game where it seems like he might get a few more dump offs, and it looks like he's going to be perhaps a little bit more successful than he has otherwise been so far this season in the run game because the Jets' run defense is so poor. So take that into consideration. The pass game probably going to be under duress, but the DVOA kind of saying, hey, they might be okay there. But then the run game, which is typically not super great for Houston, despite the output fantasy-wise from Mixon, they might be a little bit better than usual in that run game today or Thursday, whenever you're watching this before the game. So that's kind of the Houston side and how we look at the offensive and defensive line play there. So let's get into the home team. We have New York Jets. Their offensive pass protection is number 7. That's green. They're very good at that. Houston, though, number 3 in the defensive pass rush. So they're really able to get after the quarterback. They're generating a lot of sacks. They might find it a little bit more difficult to get those sacks in this game with the Jets' offensive pass protection. I think Rodgers is good at avoiding sacks, getting the ball out early, but you might see him under pressure a little bit more than he otherwise has been in a lot of the games just because Houston can get after the quarterback. So, again, one of those scenarios where their line can probably handle it, but you might see Rodgers under a little bit more duress than usual, which, again, is going to lead to dump-offs to the running back in some of these shorter routes. In terms of who's running those routes for the Jets, it might end up being the Garrett Wilson show. I don't know what Devontae Adams has been running for routes, but it sounds like he's been pretty much running a lot of outside stuff for them. So I don't know if he's going to be the one targeted. It would probably be Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin, and Breece Hall in this particular matchup. And who knows if Braylon Allen gets involved, but that's kind of how I see that. They might be under a little bit of pressure there. And then on the pass DVOA side, Houston very good at number 3, so not giving up a lot there. The Jets have been relatively inefficient at number 19. So this is telling me the Jets going to be under a little bit of pressure. That pass game probably going to struggle a little bit against this Houston defense. Not looking like a good matchup here for the Jets defense. So just keep that in mind. Or excuse me, the Jets pass game doesn't look great there for them. Kind of went over some of the targets based off of how quickly it looks like they're going to have to get the ball out. Now, moving on to the run game, we have Jets number 30 in offensive run blocking. That's red, one of the worst, bottom 3 there. Jets number 29 in offensive run DVOA, also red. Then Houston's green across the board here, so very good at stopping the run, number 6. Defensive run DVOA, number 4. What this is telling me is Jets will That's even worse matchup than what this pass game is. It's looking like they're going to struggle on the ground to move the ball in this particular game. They're probably going to struggle in that pass game as well. So don't expect a huge game from Breece Hall based off of this matchup. He can do it in the pass game. If they're trying to get the ball out, you might see him with a bunch of receptions, but that ground game likely going to struggle. That pass game looks like it's also going to struggle a little bit and be under pressure. With the Vegas line, favorite by 2, and the Jets looking like they're going to struggle. Houston otherwise looking like it might be, a studs eat matchup. They might have to get the ball out quick, but that run game being better than usual. I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to call the upset here. I think Houston goes into the confines of Jets. They're in Rutherford, New Jersey, I believe, is where they play. I think they're going to go in there, and I think Houston's going to pull out the victory against the Jets here. If you can bet on that, I certainly would put some money on that based off of this matchup. So that's how that works. Last thing here, we get into the pace of play for these teams. It can come into play when there's an ultra high or an ultra low total. For this, Houston's overall pace of play on offense, that's every single play, no matter the situation. They are 24th in how often they run a play per second. And then they're 18th in neutral situations. So that's the first 3 quarters outside of the 2-minute drill in the first half. And then any time that the game is within 8 points. So that's in a neutral situation. Anytime it's 8 points positive or, within 8 points, the score plus or minus. And the first 3 quarters outside of the 2-minute drill, essentially in that first half, that's what a neutral situation is. And Houston, number 18 in pace of play. So below average, bottom 10 in overall pace of play there for Houston. They don't play particularly fast. And then the Jets, number 17 in overall pace of play, number 20 in offensive neutral situation pace of play. Some of the other ones, when they're leading or when the score, should actually say within 8 points, plus or minus 7 points there, regardless of the quarters, or what those other ones are. It just looks like both of these teams are either right below average or a little bit right around average or a little bit below average for pace of play. Doesn't look like they're going to be running a ton of plays with the Jets looking like they're struggling. This Vegas game total being 42 doesn't look like the offenses are necessarily particularly fast. I would be okay betting the under, even though 42 is a low total. Houston might be under pressure. It's not a particularly great matchup on paper. It's just that the Jets defense hasn't been particularly great. Houston might be, a little bit better than they've otherwise been so far this season, but it's still not a great matchup. So I think the under might hit on this. I do think Houston wins this in terms of playing an island game matchup. And it's going to be lower scoring. That's when the defenses and the kickers get involved. You do have to find the winning combination of 6 players that will be in the top lineup. And if it's not going to be a high scoring game, a lot of times you're going to get a kicker or a defense or multiple of those within that winning combination lineup. So keep that in mind when you're setting your lineups. I would, based off of this, be very comfortable setting Mixon as my captain. I think he's got the best chance for a bigger game. Garrett Wilson would probably be the other option. I think the pass game is the better of the 2. And if they're needing to get the ball out quickly, I think he could be getting 10 to 12 targets in this game, but a lot of them underneath. So those are the 2 people I would be looking at for captain. And really, if the game goes according to how I think, where Houston may be up a little bit, Jets are going to have to pass a little bit. He's going to get those targets there with Garrett Wilson, and you'll probably see a few more run attempts and stuff with Joe Mixon. So I think those are going to be 2 guys that you want in your lineup, and then you can figure out the rest from there. A lot of times I will avoid the quarterbacks in those situations where it's going to be low scoring just because they spread the ball around a little bit. Somebody scores a touchdown or they have 5 catches for 50 yards. That might be, they're cheaper than those quarterbacks, and they just end up being part of an optimal lineup in those scenarios because the quarterbacks can't get enough points to make up that differential. Anyway, that's the adjusted line play report. This is the Thursday night theory version of that. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how I look at the adjusted line play report and things that I'm seeing when I go through here and how I think about these particular matchups when they pop up. That's the whole point of this. You can use it, hopefully go make some money. Like I said, betting some of these, doing some prop bets, go out and play some island game DFS, win those. That's what this is all about, is teaching you the ways of the adjusted line play report. Obviously, nothing's 100%, but this does end up being very descriptive for a lot of games. I would say, 60 to 70% of the time, it seems like this does a very good job of describing how that game will go. Will that happen on Thursday? We're yet to see, but I think that's about how it's going to go. And I hope you appreciated the video. Thanks for watching, and have a good time betting and placing your DFS lineups, making those start sit decisions for your fantasy teams. Have a good one. Bye.